I think the whole answer is relational, incarnational. That's evangelism in any situation. Just two sort of quick stories. One, in the church that I pastored in St. Louis, which was a very inner city church, we had a community health clinic that used the basement of our church for about 50 hours a week. And the director of that health center was a gay radical feminist whose grandfather had been a fundamentalist camp-meeting evangelist. Every one of his children became alcoholics. She had been an alcoholic herself. It says something about the abuse in that family that had been perpetuated in the name of the gospel. And we got into several lengthy discussions. At one point, she challenged me and said that she had never met a Christian where she thought the gospel was genuine. So I gave her John Perkins' autobiography, Let Justice Roll Down. I said, here, read this. She came back a day later and she said, you know, I have nothing to say. She said, you proved your point. I don't know if she ever accepted Christ, but at least she had evidence that she couldn't refute of the power of the gospel. The other is, I have a close friend here in Toronto in my church, with whom I've been fishing for about 5 or 6 years. Both of his parents were professing Christian. They were both alcoholics. A whole history of dysfunction in his family. And the very first time we went fishing, and this was long before he started attending our church, we had just got out on the water in his boat, and he said, Howard, I got to tell you something. He said, I am an unbeliever. He said, I don't believe, I don't want to believe, I don't think there is God, but I can't prove he isn't a God. So I'm not an atheist, but I am as agnostic as I can get. And he said, I have no interest in becoming a believer. He said, you need to know that up front, and, if that's okay with you. I said, you know what? I don't really care. I just want to fish. And over the years since then, you can't fish all day in the boat without talking. And he has not yet publicly professed his faith in Jesus, but his life shows every evidence that he's been redeemed.
The city has really messed up my theology of evangelism. I had a pretty clear picture of who is in and who is out when I went to the city, and that has gotten really jumbled up for me.
You're out.
Maybe out. Yeah. Sorry. Like Raymond, who would come to our church for meals, and alcoholic, slept homeless most of the time, worn out all of his relationships, and so I fully expected Raymond would die in the park one night. We were up. I gave him a little job. He helped me mock tar on the roof of the church, and we were up there sweating, and Raymond stopped and he said, you know, Bob, he said, I ain't no Christian, but I love my Jesus. Now, what do you do with that? Is he in or out? I think what he was trying to say is that after he had worn out all his relationships, and the police rousted him out of the park, and he got thrown in jail again, and when things looked as bleak as they were going to get, there was there was the only thing he could cling to was Jesus. That really messed up my theology about the abundant Christian life and victorious living. I don't know how God works among really, really broken people. I think my evangelism, my theology of evangelism has evolved into more of a theology of creation. That God has created all of this and us and said it was good. And the theology that I grew up with, a kind of a saved or lost mentality, and some good Presbyterian doctrine, it just hasn't squared well with my experience. Somehow, if I'm looking for the stamp of the divine in people's lives, I can see it in a crack-addicted mother who's trying her best to be a decent mother to her little baby. And she's losing the battle, but there's something in her heart that wants to do good. If I can look past the damage and see the image of God at work in people's lives, it changes how I approach people. And it changes how I converse with people. I can say to a mom like that really pleases God, the way you are loving your baby. You can, so it's an affirmation of the work of God, the stamp of God, the presence of God in the lives of people, as opposed to trying to figure out who's in and who's out, and who's lost and who's found, and who can say in the language that would satisfy my theology, now you're okay. I've kind of given up trying to figure out where people are on that continuum between darkness and light, and realizing that we're all pretty broken in one way or another, and the grace of God is abundant and rich and full. I don't think it makes me a universalist, but emotionally I'm a universalist. And the kind of evangelism that I feel most comfortable with among my diverse neighbors is looking for the stamp of the divine in their lives and affirming it wherever I see it. That's my answer to that.
Some of the best practitioners of this that I know happen to be Bible professors. Go figure. One of them is a fellow named Dave Dewar, who's a fantastic biblical languages professor at Regent College. And he's devoting the last 10 years of his professional life to advocating with the homeless on the Downtown East Side. So he's swapping his power for a different set of people. Unfortunately, Dave hasn't written any books about this. He teaches some classes on how to read the Old Testament prophets through the lens of the homeless and the people that we find in East Van. Somebody that has written a book is a guy named Bob Ekblad, E-K-L-A, Blad, Mr. B, E-K-B-L-A-D, in Washington State. And the text is Reading the Bible with the Damned. He draws pretty heavily on liberation theologians, particularly the practices of basic ecclesial communities. Charles Ringma, Viv Grigg, these are guys from Manila, Australia. have written on this. And a fellow, I think I'm going to get his name right, Gerald West from South Africa. As you might imagine, South Africa has been a scene where they need to figure this out. You know, in our context, it's First Nations where we got to think about this. You know, there are people that I met in our shelter and community meals that, you know, their father and their grandfather and their great-grandfather were in residential schools. BC still hasn't settled land treaties with most of the bands. So this is, you know, front and center for us. And the only thing you can do is say you're right. You know, we really screwed you over. I'm sorry about that. And the only authentic way I can prove that is to stop trying to appear to be the white guy who's got it all together. Right? The only authentic way that I can be with you in your pain is to be transparent with my pain. Without trying to heap that, you know, yet more bad stuff on their shoulders, right? You don't want to yoke your crud onto theirs. It also occurs to me that what we're describing is exactly what Jesus found himself in. And maybe it's because I spent a lot of time on Commercial Drive with a lot of anarchists. You know, sometimes what you got to do is go into the religious institutions and kick some tables over to prove whose side you're really on.
Final word. At the end of the day, how can, and there may be some repetition, you've already touched on some really valid points in considering this question, but at the end of the day, how do you measure success in ministry to an individual, in ministry within the community? What are some of your standards, your principles of measuring if something that you have been part of has been a success?